So I know you're having good conversation, and I try not to take too much time here, but we talked about having a little presentation, just informal, on particularly what we're doing in Wyoming around innovation. But I thought rather than focusing it just on that, I have some experiences in different innovation ecosystems that might be interesting just for perspective. So I thought I would tell you a little bit about what I'm calling university-based innovation outside the coasts. And while I'm going to focus on Wyoming, but I wanted to start pretty far to the east and work my way west. So you might be surprised, but I'll start in Russia. And I'll tell you, because some of you know, I had quite an adventure in Russia about 10 years ago. In fact, 10 years ago this month, I think it was, I decided to move from Washington, D.C., from the NSF to Moscow. And so two major themes that I'll focus on in all, I'm going to have these three different ecosystems I talk about, are the importance of partnerships to accelerate innovation. And I've got some examples of how we thought about that in different places, and the incredible importance of sustained political leadership. And so I've got some do's and don'ts on that. If leaders would hear me, I don't know. So I'll start in Skolkovo, which is a little district outside of Moscow. And I went there with Gabrielle in 2012. I left NSF last day of August, I think it was, of 2012. And there was an incredibly exciting project there that started when Medvedev came to visit Obama in 2010. And some of you in the DC area at least will remember that. It was very exciting. And Obama and Medvedev got together at a place called Ray's Hellburger in Arlington, Virginia. and there was a story reported by the Washington Post that they had this conversation about innovation. And the basic question was, how do you get so much innovation out of American universities and compared to Russian universities? And what's the secret? What do you do? And so Medvedev, as a result of that conversation, went to visit MIT and Stanford. And that led to a $300 million contract between the Russian Federation and MIT to build not just a new university, but an entire innovation ecosystem outside of Russia, outside of Moscow, often called Russia's Silicon Valley. It was in The Economist and BBC and New York Times. It's everywhere. Very exciting. And I just had I'd been called up, when you're leaving the NSF as an AD, you're sort of kind of wondering what to do next. And so I was looking at kind of VPR jobs. But my dad had lived in Russia actually before. He was in the Navy and was a Russian. It turned out he was a spy, I guess. I'm not really sure. He never told me what he did, but I found out a lot. But I found it just really exciting, the idea of helping to build an entire new university, an innovation district. And the thing that got my attention when they finally were recruiting me was, we've got the backing of MIT and the checkbook of the Russian Federation. Okay, so it's a very, very good tagline for this. And so, but the idea was to do everything differently. So with MIT as a brain trust to help think through, what could you do that would help accelerate innovation better than what MIT does? And the basic elements that came out of that were to build an institution that this is at the beginning graduate only. It's still a graduate only institution, and to have no departments in like a university department to reduce the barriers, not even have schools, but to have only interdisciplinary research centers. And there had to be three aspects, and they called this the triple helix. We had these centers for research, education, and innovation, and we called them CREs. And the whole university was built on these interdisciplinary building blocks of centers. And they had to have educational programs that were designed specifically for certain market sectors that were important, in this case, to the Russian Federation. So we defined these market sectors that were important and included, of course, information technology and biotechnology and so on. But anyway, that was number one. And so while we wouldn't have a center on, say, physics, we might have a center on, one of them was RNA therapeutics, and it had physicists and it had computer scientists and it had biologists and people from medicine and so on, working together on a complex problem. So a second piece of it was, so you had to define a curriculum, new curriculum around that. The second piece was it had to have corporate engagement. So I worked really hard finding companies that wanted to work in this environment and were deeply engaged with the university in helping even design the curriculum. And it wasn't just like, the Russian oil companies and so on, or Russian companies. It was international. So Boeing, and for example, Google, a lot of companies we talked to who did actually build relationships there, and it was very exciting. And then the third thing was there was a very strong component of entrepreneurship. So there was the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. And for those of you here at the University of Wyoming, we've just created a Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. That actually borrows from my Russian experience. It might surprise you a little bit, but anyway, that's the idea. And it was exciting. We pulled it together. We launched 10 centers in the first year and a half, but I began to worry a lot just about the political environment. And so eventually I came back to the University of Illinois, but I really learned a lot about that. Now, to my lesson about political leadership, it was an important Medvedev project. It was not well supported by Putin at the time. And you could just feel when Putin came back in, we arrived just right after Putin came in, the temperature started just going down and didn't really like it. And all these Americans were running this Russian university and so on. So it was complicated. And now with the invasion of Ukraine, most of those partners have pulled out, and I worry a lot about that university because of the partnerships being so important. And so anyway, that's one thing. So the next little stop in my journey here is when I came to the University of Illinois. I started off as the director of NCSA, the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, but pretty quickly, many of you will know Tim Colleen. He's a commissioner here. So Tim came in as the president and asked me if I'd be first the vice president for research for the university system, and then economic development. And Tim and I were thinking a lot about how can we move all the educational institutions in the state of Illinois somehow together to think about innovation. And we eventually cooked up this scheme where we would create a major innovation center in downtown Chicago, and also to align all 12 public universities. And Kyle Harfst is here. In fact, we stole Kyle away from one of the public universities to the University of Illinois in Champaign to help to build out what we called the Illinois Innovation Network. But there was a deep understanding of how we would try to do this. What was the vision? We needed to link urban and rural economies. And this is a really important principle that we had there. So we would create an innovation district in Chicago that all of higher education in the state of Illinois would work together, plus the national labs. I was one of great highlight of my career there was being on the board of Argonne National Lab. Talked a lot with some of you folks here who are here now at Argonne, and to build out also an international context. So I went to Israel a lot and developed partnerships there. So to try to create like a global collaboratory for innovation where it could all be concentrated, and then have students from Carbondale and other parts of Illinois, Peoria, come up to Chicago and be trained, and then come back, make sure there's a home base for them to then take what they learned. It's like semester abroad in Chicago kind of thing for people from Carbondale and so on. So that was the vision of that. The governor really supported it. It was Governor Rauner at the time himself. An entrepreneur and a venture capitalist. So we got it immediately. And in spite of the fact that we had budget cuts in the state of Illinois, I mean, terrible budget cuts. We had at the University of Illinois, we had our appropriation for 2 years because they did not pass a state budget for 2 years because of trust between the legislature and the governor's office. We got a 45% budget cut to the university from our state appropriation for a couple of years, but we're able to get through that because there was a lot of external funding. But anyway, the point is we emerged from that, not only getting our budget back, but they did appropriate $500 million for this innovation initiative across the state. Now, about political leadership, Bruce lost the election and J.B. Pritzker came in, and the big question for us was, does Pritzker support this? And it turned out that while they argued about everything, the one thing that I could tell that they supported was this project. So J.B. Pritzker and company, Penny and the whole team, the family, I should say, supported this project, and it continues to this day. And so Kyle is there at the helm of trying to build out that Illinois Innovation Network. But there were innovation hubs across the state to be developed out, and the coupling with Chicago, and it's still a work in progress, but it takes time. But political leadership supported it for a long enough time to get it going. So with those lessons, coming to the University of Wyoming, One of the first things I did was test the governor out for these ideas, and the governor was very supportive, so felt good about that. I started calling up, I think Darren, you and I probably had a call very early on. I called up the community college presidents even before moving. Could we build a consortium of some kind to help create in fact, in Wyoming, there's basically two things. There's the one university and there's the 8 community colleges. And so it's like the simplest ecosystem you can have to try to align. And we worked hard to really align. So we're not going to reproduce Russia or Illinois in Wyoming. Everything's different, but these experiences are really important. Political support and the partnerships, because no institution is big enough to do it alone. I think that's one of the important lessons that I had from other parts of my career as well. So we developed a white paper with all the community colleges. And is Sandy here? I don't know if Sandy Caldwell's here or not, but Sandy, oh, there you are. Hey, Sandy. So we developed a kind of a white paper, and that was kind of the easy part. It was like, okay, we got a common vision here. I think we developed that over Christmas of a year and a half ago now. And the governor, I think, bought into it. So the governor then announced we have the Wyoming Innovation Network initially, then changed to partnership. And so there are complicated reasons why that change occurred, but I'll just keep that part out. But then we found the hard part, of course, is how do you operationalize a common vision when you have different institutions in different parts of the state and with different communities, different boards actually, and so on. And we have worked on a weekly basis. I mean, for over a year. Weekly basis. And where's Steve? Steve Farkas is here. Steve has become the executive director of this in order to really, really drive forward this statewide innovation system. And we're making progress, but we achieved some really big success in that the governor made it a top priority to help fund the initial efforts using money from the America Rescue Plan. So we had, I think, $27 million in the first round. And then the state legislature, which has not been the easiest customer for higher education in the state here in the last couple of years, also bought onto it. And so appropriated another $27 million. And this is programmatic funding, and actually has earmarked another $27 million thereabouts for next year if we are able to achieve certain goals that we've laid out. So I'll come back to them in a second, but I want to just take a step back and say a couple words about what we've done here at the university, just at the university, to help prepare us for this. So almost the first week before I got here, I remember writing an email to Ann Alexander, who was the interim provost, and I said, I've been thinking about areas we should focus on. And I tried to find themes that I thought everybody could see themselves in. So I said, the university needs to become more digital. It needs to become more entrepreneurial. And by that, I don't just mean training entrepreneurship. The university itself has got to hustle for funds from every source it can outside of the state funding as well. So that more entrepreneurial, more interdisciplinary, kind of based on a lot of my own career experiences and all of ours, I'm sure, and more inclusive. And the inclusive part is, as we said in our breakout session, we talked about, it's the fundamental ingredient for innovation, to have people with diverse backgrounds. So I really think of that through an innovation agenda. And so that email led to ultimately what we called 4 pillars. And the 4 pillars of the university are those 4 now. And that we had working groups work for a whole year of faculty and probably 6 months or so. And out of that came some recommendations that we've quickly adopted. We've built a school of computing, or we've started to build a school of computing, I should say, that is interdisciplinary. It's across the whole university. So we still, of course, will support computer science and electrical engineering. We're combining them to have critical mass, but we're doing that. We've also just started a Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation that will support innovation programs. So we'll have minors for every single student to learn about entrepreneurship. We'll have more corporate partnerships to coordinate them across the entire university and come to the state in a second. But first things first, at home, get ourselves organized, and then look at markets that are important to the state. So of course, agriculture. I think I've seen Dean Rasco here somewhere. Agriculture is so important for this state, and so is engineering. So there's the land grant kind of functions that we have to make sure are well supported here. But then also thinking about the things that drive the future of the economy in terms of new markets, like hospitality and tourism, strong and growing here. So we created a new program called the Wyoming Outdoor Recreation, Tourism, and Hospitality program, or the WORTH initiative, and we're working across the state to help build that up so it supports the future of the economy. So as much as I'm a product of a liberal arts education, and I'll go to bat for that every day, but we need to add in these other things as well, because they are critical to the future of the economy of the state. So thinking a lot about how do we analyze ourselves and align with the future importance. So these things now come together, I think, extremely well, because we thought about, like, the School of Computing. It's not just for us, it's to help support the growth of computing and digital skills across the whole state. So we're looking not only with the community colleges, but with companies, and we've started in even a software development program. I'll come back to the development of partnerships in a second, but we're doing this at a statewide level. The WORTH initiative, statewide level, working with people in Jackson and the communities and the hotels, the state agencies for tourism and hospitality. Wind River, the reservation, where we have two tribes, the Northern Arapaho and Eastern Shoshone. They're very interested in helping to grow a tourism industry there. So we're thinking about how can the university mobilize itself to help advance the state. So that's the basic principle. Now, where we don't have the capacity, so we have a very small computer science department here, and we have also somewhat larger, but still rather small electrical engineering department. So we combine them for critical mass, create this broad School of Computing, but it at the moment has one professor. That's Gabrielle, is the director of the School of Computing. So how do we grow capacity? So partnerships, of course. So of course we have a long connection with Argonne. We're talking with Argonne a lot about how to build partnerships there, and we'll talk with all the labs. Of course, Idaho National Lab was my new partner here in the commission, and so on. But also others. So Cardiff University in the UK happens to have a Welsh National Software Academy. And the cool thing about it is the Welsh have built new programs to modernize their economy. But by the way, they're based on coal and sheep, traditionally. Sounds a lot like Wyoming. So they're a little bit ahead of us in trying to modernize their economy. So this Software Academy in Newport is very, very focused on working with industry to train kids in software engineering. So it's a 3-year program. So you talk to them, you're like, could we dial that just down a little bit for a 2-year program for community colleges, or could we turn it into a 4-year program for the University of Wyoming? And they're working with us. One of their measures of success is, do they have international impact? So it's not just they're doing good for us, it's in their own interest to do that. So coming back to this idea where you can't do it alone, and generally you can't, because you don't have enough wherewithal, build these partnerships. And so these are, maybe that's enough, but those are just some examples of what we're trying to do going forward. And I think in the next year, you'll see that this state is really organizing itself to advance the state in all hands on deck from government. I see Robin Cooley is here. We've talked a little bit. She's workforce development, the governor's office, the Wyoming Business Council, the university, and all the community colleges, and some partners across the country and across the world are helping us build this. And the very last thing I'll say about it is that we also have begun to organize ourselves, as I think I said yesterday, with the Rocky Mountain West rural mountain states, and that includes the Dakotas, Idaho, and what else up there? Montana. And so, and of course, there are others around as well, but we particularly felt that this is like the rural of America that doesn't really have an urban center in the Rocky Mountain West. So we've had some meetings, including a meeting up at Montana State. The VPRs and a number of the presidents got together. How can we begin to organize ourselves as a region? And then, we're watching what's happening in Washington. NSF has a new TIP directorate and other things. So we're going to be as ready as we can to move forward. So I think that's, any questions? Maybe I'll just stop there.
Excuse me.
Where are you looking to move that?
Sure. So the question was, well, what about the basic statistics of graduate, undergraduate? What's the size of the scale of the university? So we have 13,000 students. I think it's roughly 9,000 or so undergraduates, a few thousand graduates. Is that right? Yeah, Kyle says yes. So, we do want to grow that, but we don't want to become a big land grant institution. So one thing we say here, small is our superpower, and but we need critical mass. And so we don't have yet a formula, but we're looking into how we might grow that and to what level we need to grow it. But it should be grown somewhat. But you can get an education here that is unusual in terms of a land grant institution. You have really passionate faculty, really engaged with their students. And as you've seen, we have marvelous facilities here. So,
And then how about the core areas of research and where you see growth opportunities there? Kind of what the ambition of scale is for that?
well, I mean, certainly, for example, the School of Computing is one, and it's not just because we need digital skills for our students. Of course, that's primary in this, but I'm thinking about revenue streams to the university. So as a university becoming more entrepreneurial, computing is one of the places where funding will come in, of course, from federal agencies and from companies, and also lays the seeds for a lot of innovation to go forward. But we didn't want to focus it in one area. So we wanted to make sure agriculture can participate directly in that, as can the arts and humanities and social sciences, as can engineering and so on. So that, I think, will be a major growth area. We've currently earmarked $3 million annual budget to get that going, but we'll see. I suspect it will grow in time. And then, of course, agriculture, we're thinking about what's 21st century agriculture and precision agriculture and such things. We're talking with some very exciting companies about the possibility of building specifically curricula around precision agriculture and controlled environment agriculture, let's say, where I was telling some of you, the best strawberry ever produced, according to Driscoll, the company that sells you strawberries, when they talked to this company, the company's called Plenty in California now. They said, well, that's a great strawberry. Where'd you get that? Well, it was grown in Laramie in February. And so, so there's a lot you can do with this. So those are just some examples.
Good afternoon, Dr. Seidel. Our speaker yesterday, the summit keynote yesterday from the National Science Foundation, mentioned something about a concept paper being due June 3rd in order to form one of these engines. Is that something you'll be going for or going after?
June 30th, yes.
Or June 30th.
Yeah, and so Parag Chitnis is our VPR here, but Parag, I know is, I don't know, Parag is, where's Parag, but there, oh yeah, there you are. So yeah, we are scrambling to pull together ideas for this right now. And of course, they'll be done in partnership. I'm trying to prepare ourselves for this, not just as a university, but the state. We're working together. We need, I think a lot of us need a little more time to bake things at the level we really want to, but we'll have some ideas in there. Parag, do you want to speak to that?
The university is preparing this larger one, and there are at least 9 different smaller planning grant ones that I know of around the campus. People are participating with the mountain states, with Colorado, with Utah, with Oklahoma. So I think with the states with similar type of opportunities, I think we are coming together.
You were mentioning NSF and TIP, and yesterday we saw like a brilliant presentation, and also the speaker was showing like all the legislation that is already in place and the money that have been allocated. While I was talking, I was checking like the voting roll. Both your senators voted against every single one of those laws. So the point is, and usually senators, senators, they tend to do what the people want. They also try to lead sometimes. I jokingly say that I wish we had an electorate that would match, the brilliance of its leadership. My point is like, are you sure that everybody's on board? I'm talking about mostly the population. I forget the senators. And can you start having also a more meaningful conversation with the senators and tell them, let's say that probably, instead of scoring like a cheap kind of result there, they should do a little bit more for Wyoming?
So this is a really interesting question. And I'll say, first of all, most decidedly, everyone is not on board. So, but that's okay. We're getting momentum, and I think we're winning over people where we absolutely need to, and so we're making progress in terms of like, this is a good idea. So generally speaking, I'm very excited about the progress. I think I don't want to break any confidences, but I've had lengthy conversations with both of our senators about this, and they like there are some parts of the U.S. Innovates and Competes Act, for example. They're also convinced it's sure to pass. And so they will, I think, try to help us in ways that are important for Wyoming. At the same time, there are things in those bills that they don't like. So they can make sure if they pass and they vote against them, but there's still some things that are good. I guess that's politics in Washington, but that's the way it works. So we have continued to work with them, and I feel actually supported by them.
Yes, Neil Thompson from MIT. I was wondering if you mentioned the importance of political support and maintaining that, and the challenge of doing it across changes. I was wondering if you could give us the benefit of your experience in terms of, like, when you're now designing an innovation initiative, what do you think about as the things that sort of make things more durable so that it's more likely to pass? And what are the things that maybe, like, those of us with less experience might think are good things, but actually in your experience turn out to be a problem?
Good question. So, I mean, the most important thing in anything that's kind of driven from the top is to make sure you've got enough ground support that it continues to go no matter what. And so you've got to convince people that in many cases that it was their idea, or that at least get them excited about it and so on, and make sure that there's a strong enough vector to get it going. I think that's probably, in addition to making sure there's enough political support. So you have to work both sides of it, but you can't do anything effective without enough ground support. So getting people on board, and in a university, that typically means the faculty, and there's a lot of convincing to do with faculty, as we all know. I mean, they're wonderful, and I mean, I've been a faculty member, and I've been up there saying, what on earth is the administration doing? I can't understand. What I'll tell you a little, not exactly a secret, but when Tim came in to be the president of the University of Illinois, some of the directors of centers like NCSA and others at the University of Illinois got together and say, what can we do to keep Tim out of our hair? So I've been like that. I understand the faculty mentality, and that's helpful, though, I think, in bringing people on board. So you just got to make sure people see that they've got something in it for them, but the faculty at a university are just the key to everything, of course. So I don't know. Oh, yeah. I mean, well, just one example, maybe this is an extreme example, it just occurs to me. Most recently, I've been working hard with our administration to develop relationships with the Native American communities in Wind River, and I mentioned them earlier. They're really important constituents in this state, and there have been many fumbles of the university working with the Native American communities over a long time. And I myself have realized I fumbled a few times with them. And it's partly because you just have really got to understand the local culture in order to make progress. So simple ideas that sort of seem like, oh, this is bound to be a great thing. And it turns out it just falls completely flat because you just don't understand something about the local culture. So, I mean, the general thing is, I think, and so I'm still learning. I mean, I'm new to Wyoming, but hopefully I fumble less and less as we go forward.
Within the university, in sociology, anthropology, is there a faculty in Native American studies and culture?
We have a Center for Native American Culture. We have an office that we're just revamping now called HIPARI, the High Plains American Indian Research Institute, something like that, that will report to the Vice President for Research. And we're very interested in supporting that. We have a school of, I always get the names mixed up, but culture, gender, social justice in some order, that has a lot of support around particularly Native American culture. And we have, there's Native American Studies degree, and there's also, we teach Northern Arapaho language but not Eastern Shoshone yet. And so I'm working hard on making sure we do that. That's not taken very nicely very well by the Eastern Shoshone folks. So we're working hard to address these things. Okay, good. Well, thanks a lot.